Yesterday after my show, I got in the car and I had a planned call with a friend who is very involved in politics on the conservative side, works with various candidates and on messaging and things like that. And what we talked about for over an hour was the idea that here we are in 2020. We have President Trump up for re-election, of course, in November, and the entire U.S. House and the Senate, the control of the Senate is in play, of course, because of the number of people who are up for re-election, the Republican side and the Senate. And we were talking about, what is it we think would appeal to Americans? And especially, the suburban vote, the concern that you hear people express that there is a unwillingness or questioning among people living in suburbs, and especially women in suburbs, why they would vote Republican or what their concerns are. How do you talk to them about where we are in America? So we had a pretty in-depth talk on a bunch of policies and messaging and such. But it got me thinking more and more about the idea that if you step back a little bit and look at just where we are today and what we're watching happen, you see destruction and riots in the streets in Democrat-run cities around this country. I'm not talking about one little eruption at Berkeley. I'm talking about Democrat-run cities, violence and destruction in the streets. You have massive violence. You have a movement to defund the police, which even among many leftists, they kind of are quietly whispering. Even there was a spokesperson for the Congressional Black Caucus saying, that is the dumbest slogan I ever heard. But defund the police, very trendy, very popular. You have all sorts of things like the cancel culture. You have threatening conduct by the American left. You have repression by social media. All these things you think people be watching and would say, wow, I can't believe that anyone is even worried about the elections in the fall. I mean, America really cannot want to go down the path that it seems like we're going down. And that is what I was thinking after we were finished running through policies and messaging. But the idea of what is it that would possibly cause people in the suburbs or anywhere in America, in the big cities where the violence is occurring, what is it that would resonate with them in the fall and more particularly help them understand the danger presented to America by what the left is proposing and what they're telling you they're going to do? And so that's kind of what I want to focus on today. I want to talk about, because I think if you listen to my show, you're probably very politically active. You have a lot of friends who are politically active. You're always thinking about ways to talk to your non-politically active friends. And you're always trying to think of ways of explaining the ideas, the issues to people. I also want to mention on this, as time is, I'm going to close out my first 5 with this point. There is polling that claims to show that President Trump is lagging behind Joe Biden, that supposedly if the election were held tomorrow, Joe Biden would win the swing states, or at least a sufficient number of them, that Trump is lagging in the polls. And so, people then really get panicky and they think, oh my gosh, how could that possibly be? How could it be, given everything we know? And I think there's a gloom setting in among some, not just elected officials in Washington, but a gloom setting in even among Republican voters, just in the average Joe American. You wake up in the morning, you think, wow, the country just seems like it is breaking down. It is it's in turmoil. We have incredible racial tension. We have massive violent marches happening in this country. We have, it seems like the country is just such a mess. And people feel a little bit gloomy. They get to the point of thinking, I don't know how we're ever going to pull out of it, and I don't know how the Republicans are going to win in 2020. I don't know how the Republicans are going to be able to hold off the mob that is coming from the left, the issues, the policies the leftists would bring to our country if they were to win the White House, the Senate, and the House. I think there's a gloom and a concern setting in. And I want to say one last thing about these polls. America is always we have polls, first of all. I know plenty of you email me and say, don't listen to polls, don't worry. You can't listen to every poll, but you also cannot ignore all of the polls. I think that's really important to understand. But the other really kind of deep thought, and I want to weave it in our discussion today, has to do with the idea of where we really are in America in terms of the differences between the left and the right. You know, when America has been in wars in the past, when we had an external enemy, you know, we had back the Revolutionary War, we had the British, we had, you know, the myriad of enemies we had in World War II, fighting Germany, Japan, Italy. You know, we had times during war we could see the enemy and we could identify the enemy because they wore a particular uniform and in many cases spoke a particular language. But we are very legitimately and honestly in a war within America, within the boundaries of our country, a war for the very identity, the heart and soul of America. I know that even leftists use that term. Even Biden talks about that, which I don't know what he means by it. I don't know if he knows what he means by it. But I'm going to tell you what I mean. There is an America, the real America, the America of the founding, that actually respects the rule of law, that actually provides individual freedom with individual responsibility under God, that provides rights to each individual simply because they were born as recited in the Declaration of Independence, that strives every day to make America a more perfect union, to improve the problems that we do have, to have a rule of law that applies to everyone, to have a just society, to have a society where freedom is the rule and the norm and the assumption, and the freedoms of speech and religion and the freedoms that flow from free markets are the given, the assumption. That's the real America. Where the left is in this country today. And when I say the left, the Democrat Party, which has been completely consumed by the Marxist radical left in this country, the vision they have for America's future is nothing like the vision that America was founded on and the vision that the Republican Party tries to move forward. Not perfectly, not always consistently, but there are two very radically different images of what America could become. The war happening in America, people talk about it's a battle of ideas, and it is kind of, or it's not just a battle of policies, it is a battle of ideas, but at its core, it really is a battle for the identity of America, for the idea of whether or not we in America today can hold on to this precious, extraordinary experiment in human liberty that started at our founding and is greatly threatened today. The question in 2020 is, are we able to, those of us who still love the idea of America and want it to be a better and more perfect union, but we want to hold on to our freedoms, do we have the courage to fight this battle? Because the leftists in this country, I often call them the Democrat media mob, but the leftists in this country seem to control the conversation, they control the use of language, they control the media. We have a conservative base in this country that is increasingly silenced, afraid to speak up, and actually being kind of sent home to be quiet and don't get involved in the conversation. The left seems to own the culture war right now. So part of what we need to do, those of us who want to hold on to America, to the America of the founding, the astonishingly and vital, important ideas upon which America was founded, we have to be willing to be warriors in the culture war. We have to be willing to speak up. We have to be willing, even though we know we may get slings and arrows and mockery, we have to be willing to speak up, to be in the fight. Because this is exactly what we are facing in this country. It's a fight for the very heart and soul of America. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five.